Town of Southern Shores Council Special Meeting / Budget Work Session for April the 17th, 2018 is now in session. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. Please join me in a moment of silence. Thank you. This time I'll consider it public comment. I don't think so either. We'll find out. Thank you, Bonnie. We'll close public comment. This time I'll call on the town manager.
Yes, Mr. Mayor and Council, as you recall, in February planning session, you directed that the cost of the East Dogwood Trail walking path be placed or projected in this year's upcoming budget for 18-19, and you also directed that the town engineer come and present his plans for the East Dogwood Trail walkway to you. So that's on the agenda for today, and I just want to let you know that he's here, Andy and Joe are here. They're ready to discuss the plans and answer any and all questions about East Dogwood Trail. And after you finish with them, also they have included their cost projections. As you know, I've sent those to you ahead of time. As soon as they finish that, I would suggest or recommend that we let them go so they can get off the town clock at that point. So also, as you recall, last week, as we indicated in that same meeting, they have finished, Joe has finished a preliminary draft design of South Dogwood Trail that has nothing to do with this presentation, but in sometime in the future, he can come back and as we work on that, present that at council's pleasure. But today's East Dogwood Trail.
Thank you, Peter. Good morning, Joe. Good morning, Andy.
In a second. Good morning. What you have in your packet is one of two preliminary designs. The first design that was included in your packet was a design that was centric to low impact development and included the narrowing of the lanes of traffic to reduce impervious coverage, which contributes to stormwater runoff. Staff has since directed the engineering team to look at an alternative design that is basically a bare bone path. That drawing was completed at the end of last week before it could be included in your packet, and a hard copy of those drawings are up on the whiteboard, and I can wheel those over and we can go through the differences between the design that's in your packet and that bare bones design. We did look at 3 alternative surfaces. We looked at concrete, which turns out to be the least expensive, asphalt, which is in the middle of the grouping, and something called FlexiPave, which is a product that's used in a lot of tracks and walking paths that has a rubberized aggregate in it. It's a little softer and more forgiving on knees and joints for runners. That was done in response to a request from a resident. So we looked at those 3 alternatives. Concrete is the least expensive and has the most reflectivity. Asphalt takes specialized equipment to put it in there at that width, which, by the way, these are all 5-foot width designs. Asphalt takes specialty equipment, which drives the price up higher than concrete, and the FlexiPave, because it's a specialized product, is considerably more expensive. So concrete, again, is the least expensive. The alignment of East Dogwood can be achieved at a 5-foot width with the reduction of with the elimination of no trees other than small scrubby brush. The original design, which narrowed the traffic lanes, created a space for the path so that there was even less vegetative removal. The new path design, you'll see in 2 locations, the road itself appears to encroach on Chickahaw Common property. which would push the path with a 5-foot offset even further into Chickahaw Common property. We did not get a survey of the specific vegetation in those areas, so it's over the dune, the top of the dune, so you're into duneland topography. It's generally smaller trees, smaller oaks, smaller pines, but there would be some vegetation impact on the new design where we're doing the straight path. So I'm here to answer any questions you have. If you want to go through that design in a little bit more detail, I can wheel that over to where you can see it and we can walk through the differences. But basically, the main difference is on that new design, the road width was not narrowed at all and the path was offset 5 feet from the existing road. So no impacts to the existing road configuration. Any questions?
In the new scheme, is there a significant cost savings, or is it neutral, or is it what do you?
There are some cost savings, clearly. There's no asphalt demolition, no new asphalt, no curbs that are associated with reconfiguring some of the islands in the center, so there is a cost reduction. The other thing we looked at on that design was pulling out all the crosswalks. There's been some discussion at the engineering level about how we get people from cross streets like Hillcrest and Sea Oats, especially across the 2-lane section where the lanes are divided, safely across. So the design incorporates pedestrian crosswalks at each major street intersection. The ones that are more important are the ones that are up on, Sheila, could you advance the screen to page 4, or plan sheet 4, so it should be, yep, keep going.
Yeah, we'll go.
Okay, one more. All right, so right there is a section, can you guys can see the screen?
1 second.
Okay. Sorry.
You might have to slide
Oh, yes.
in manually.
Yeah, no, but you need to push.
Can we get it, see if
Right
Yeah, let
next
somebody
to it.
tall do it. Hey, Andy, it's your job.
That one. One more.
Okay.
That's what I'm here for. Crisis averted. Feeling good about today, Gary. Feeling good.
There you go.
Okay, so in this illustration, you can see where the lanes are divided. And for example, if we look at Sea Oats, which is in the top panel, people are going to want to walk across those 2 lanes without some pedestrian crossing that describes a location where they can do that safely. They're going to walk wherever they might, wherever they decide to go. Maybe they'll walk down the north side of East Dogwood for a spell and then jump across there. So in order to keep the police department from having to give a bunch of jaywalking tickets, we came up with the concept of doing some pedestrian crosses, which identify a safe location. On the new design, those have been broken out as alternates because we looked at the bare bones path just to run a path parallel to the road to try to get the cost down to work, to try to get some improvements of the path done. So on that design, you'll see, and you might be able to see it from here, large circles that show those crosswalks and describe them as alternates. And the reason being is we try to break out the cost of those to reduce the overall path cost. And keep in mind that these drawings are alignment drawings. They're giving us concepts about the alignment of the path. These are not bid documents ready to go out for bid. But you can see that this happens to be Hickory, where there's a circle around me with alternates. There's also some amenity areas where there's like a rest area with a bench. We looked at the corral path and some of the items that they have along that path to see about doing some areas where people could stop and get rest, in a shaded area, put some recycling cans and garbage cans, and I'm sure, the dog waste receptacle types of amenities. So those areas were identified and pulled out, and so in the engineering cost estimate, there is an item that correlates with each of these, alternate 1, alternate 2, alternate 3, etc. If we flip to the easternmost extent of the roadway, in these 2 locations along Sea Oats, and now in defense of the surveyor that prepared this information, this is not a boundary survey, an official boundary survey. It's basically tax map data. The tax map data is not survey grade accuracy. So the right-of-way is shown here with this black phantom line type, and again here. And in each case, the road encroaches here, the actual road encroaches on private property, and a bigger section of the road appears to encroach on private property there. In order to determine the actual amount of encroachment, the surveyor would need to do an accurate boundary survey and then determine the amount of the footprint. Because again, all this property line information shown is tax map grade, not survey quality information. So you would need to make sure of that. But what is important to note is that when we narrow the lane width, we were able to eliminate those road encroachments and minimize the tax encroachments. And the concept of narrowing the road width was because these are about 20 feet wide and they're one directional. Typically, you could reduce that by many feet and get it to be a little bit more narrow, which would facilitate a place. If we took up asphalt here, now we have a clear open area that we've just disturbed, that we can put a new path in that similar footprint. So again, when we push out into Chippewa Common, we don't know what kind of vegetation is in here. It's not extremely robust because it's probably maintained as the right of way by the town. But there will be some minimal vegetation disturbance here that, whereas earlier design, we were able to comfortably say no major trees will be removed. There might be some small vegetation here that will be removed.
That's CO's, right?
This is CO's, right?
That's CPOA property, I think.
It is.
On the
So,
south side.
bottom line, we would need to get an easement or a road path to there from Chippewa property owner association, which probably will not. And in all reality, even if we go up to the original side, the narrow lanes, we'll probably need construction easement from them because construction that will probably kick it over on the
Right,
back.
right. Understood.
So this is bare bones design. These are now alternatives. There's an engineering cost estimate. I don't believe that version is in your packet. Somewhere around $250,000 should be just the bare bones path.
Right, we got that.
With contingency or without?
With the contingency, but because these are aligned with law, because we have gone through all the details, locked up everything, I feel that we really need to look at contingency number. Because there'll be some things that we come across as we actually go through and do plan and profile sections of the path, how together details for current sections, and realize we need something here where we were submitted in this stage of drawing. That generally kicks the price up. Plus, we also offer that both of the earthwork contractors that do this scale of work, although this would be open if it's concrete to other competitors, are all very busy right now. Not just because it's this time of year, but because the economy is moving along and lots of people are doing lots of development projects. Yes, sir.
This drawing doesn't show it starting at the Dogwoods intersection. Looks like it starts around Hickory Trail. Is that correct?
No, it does start, both versions show it starting, this is the intersection right here.
Okay.
This is the corner, if this continued on the sheet, it would be right here. So it starts with the driveway of, who's Dr. Wilkinson's mother's house. It's right here where the stationing starts at 0.00.
Okay.
And it should be the same one you're drawing on sheet one, on plan sheet one.
Yeah, I got it. Okay. Yep.
Joe, at the top of the, near Sea Oats, Hillcrest, that area over there, as you're heading west, did you and Andy consider anything about the blinding sun that sometimes can be in your eyes? Okay. I mean, that's a tough problem to tackle. I'm just wondering if some kind of warning traffic light or, flashing signal or...
That's a very good idea. There was a young lady killed on Collington Road last year because of the same issue.
Yes, that's the worst case scenario.
So there's a lot of places in this community, anybody who drives west on the bridge going over to Currituck at 5 o'clock or East Lake, it's everywhere.
Well, we'll tackle that once we get started.
But those kinds of details are wide.
Yeah.
It becomes important to hold on to that those types of items come out and they cost you a little solar panel on the side and a light. You're adding some cost.
In your mind, we can add these other amenities later without too much trouble, just a cost sale.
Absolutely. In fact, you know, there's always economy of scale. You can add them all at once, you probably get a little better price because you're doing all the work at one time. But it would not be, you could easily add this feature, a small contractor, a local contractor, and they can knock it out in a couple of weeks.
You'd still strike the road for a crosswalk?
Not if you don't do this at this time. You have to do all.
But you'd still need to strike it, even if you didn't put the little path in the median.
I don't know that you would do that. It gives someone only half of what they, because all new sidewalks have to be ADA compliant. So you have to have these detectable dome surfaces, which you see placed in concrete. So if you were just to strike it without doing that, you would not comply with American Disabilities Act. So what you would, instead of just striking it there and not putting in this connection or having some place for people to start, it would not be my recommendation to do part of it without giving them the complete picture of where exactly it should be. In other words, if you only stripe it, then you're going to have to go to the path through there as people trudge through the sand and whatever else is going up there.
They're going to do what they're doing now. They're going to walk down Seos or whatever street it is, Wax Myrtle, and they're going to go over and join the trail and go out down the water.
Yeah, if you don't do this, they'll cross here, or they'll cross here, or they'll go on here, cross here.
The numbers come out,
But
but if you can't, then it's not.
it's all a matter of how much you want to achieve in one.
Right, right.
We can pick and choose.
Any questions for Joe? Try it.
Are there any thoughts or questions for me before we go?
Thanks, Joe.
Okay. I'll leave you with if you want.
Thanks, Joe. Thanks, Andy.
Well, and he's got the amenities as the alternates, so we can pull those out. So we'll get a price for it and choose what to do.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Joe. Thank you, Andy. Have a good day. This time I'll call on our town manager to review the draft projected general fund revenues.
All right, thank you, Mr. Mayor and members of the council. Recall, this is a meeting for us together to review a forecast of the projected revenues and also projected expenses. In approximately 2 weeks, I'll be filing a balanced budget, proposed balanced budget for the next fiscal year as required by state fiscal law. So today, we're just giving a forecast of what that will be. Again, it's not a budget, and it's basically the projected revenues and the projected expenses to maintain the same level of services for next year, as well as some services that the council has directed itself be projected. In your packet, I had previously sent to you a one-page memorandum that outlines some points that the finance officer and I wanted to make sure that everyone clearly understood as a part of this forecast. The first item are the fact that the total personnel expenses projected for the town include certain costs, which are annual costs that the council has approved each year, some of them dictated by market, some of them by council policy, and some of them as required by state law. And I'll just run down those real quick before we start on the lines. There is projected in this In the upcoming projected budget, there will be a cost of living adjustment recommendation of 2.5%. There'll be a health insurance premium increase that's dictated by the market of 4.5%. The FICA cost would be 7.65%. Retirement contribution for regular employees, 7.75%. That's an increase by the State Retirement Board. And also a retirement increase for law enforcement is 8.5%. That is required for law enforcement officers. The employer 501K contribution of 5%, for regular employees, and then the employer 401K for law enforcement 5%, which, as you recall, last year's discussion, that is mandated by state law for the law enforcement officers. And also included is the town's dependent coverage offset, which is audited in the term in lieu of benefits of $7,800 per employee to offset employees' dependent coverage for insurance, healthcare insurance. Number two on the memo calls to your attention that the draft budget's total projected expenses to maintain the same level of services, as well as the items that the council has directed to be projected, is $6,388,835. Those items that I reference, that the council has directed, include the bulletin items there. Those are the path that we just went over, by the town engineer, the East Dogwood Trail pedestrian path. You directed that the cost of that be included back on February 20th at your meeting at that date. And what is projected is the lowest of the three costs that Mr. Anloff has projected. So $250,000 is in there for that path. Also included is the increase in annual capital street appropriation that the council voted on February 20th be included. The result of that directive was that 5% of current valuation, 0.05 of current valuation per 100, and that results in an increase in the capital street improvement appropriation to be projected of $138,870. Also included as projected expense directed by the council is the town facilities assessment, which was brought up at the February 20th meeting for town buildings. That was directed to be included as well, and that quote was $26,370 by the architect. Also, the council voted on February 6th for, as a directive, that the expense of a beach vulnerability study be included in this year's projected expenses, and also the expense of survey updates by the coastal engineer. That was a total of $94,000, and broken out, there is the vulnerability study is $60,000, and the survey update $34,000. So those total expenses, just those which are part of the inclusions, were $509,240. The current forecast as of today shows that the FY 18-19 expenses exceed the projected revenues by $296,261. So that's what I will be working with over the next 2 weeks. If council does not do anything to make any changes at all, I'll present you with a balanced budget considering that offset. The third item on the memo was basically a projection, the actuals for the unassigned fund balance since last June 30, 2017. And recall in your audit, the town audit, at that time, the unassigned fund balance was $3,461,071. And then the council has made several adjustments or draws from that over this year. And also we are still anticipating a FEMA reimbursement amount. So the FEMA reimbursement amount from Hurricane Matthew still anticipated as $114,558 to come in. And then the total of the budget amendments that the council has directed during this year of 447,251, and listed on the memo were those draws that the council did during the year. Also, the fourth item that we placed in the informational memo is the actual balance of the town's capital reserve fund, which at the current date is $361,815. And recall that state law only allows the council to direct expenditures from that fund based on the exact purpose for which it was set up. And this town's capital reserve fund may be used for any capital expenses dealing with streets, bridges, canals, beaches, and infrastructure. So to go through the projected revenues and a forecast of the projected revenues and also the projected expenses thus far that I'll be working with over the next 2 weeks, we would go to the first page of the general fund summary. And it's got at the bottom there, page 1. And this is a summary, and we'll go through each line item in just after this page. But the summary shows at the top revenues, and we're working off of FY 18-19 requested, which is the third column from the left, or the last full column to the right. The projected ad valorem taxes based on the county's distribution, the state's distribution formula for the county, the local legislation, to Southern Shores, $3,013,549. The next line is what we call tourism taxes. Makes up a significant portion of the town's budget, and these are the occupancy taxes, sales taxes, and land transfer taxes. They are projected in the same formula to be $2,129,539. The unrestricted and restricted revenues are the next two lines, and we'll go over those in a minute, 426,622 and 205,264. The revenues from permits and fees were projected this year to be $124,000, and other revenues that we'll go over are projected to be $173,600. So the total projected revenues for this year are $6,072,574. Dropping down are the projected expenditures for this year so far that I'll be working with over the next 2 weeks. The admin department, $1,007,058. Code enforcement, $300,409. Police department, $1,691,853. Streets, bridges, and canals department, $1,157,597. Public Works Department, $546,339. Sanitation Services Department, $688,465. And the Fire Contracted Services, $813,614. The Ocean Rescue Contracted Service, $163,500, brings that column to $6,368,835. And recall that also there will be a persistent with the town policy or practice for the last 4 years as a transfer out to the Capital Reserve Fund for canal maintenance of $20,000 to go into its subline in the Capital Reserve Fund. So that brings you a total projected expenses so far of $6,388,835, which are over the projected revenues in an amount of $296,261.
Peter, how do you plan to balance this proposed budget with approximately $300,000?
I will, over the next 2 weeks, be looking at these lines, and most likely will be proposing a transfer from one of the funds,
From undesignated funds?
either that or the Capital Reserve Fund, if the council makes no change at all in these projections today.
Okay.
Peter, could you remind me, because I know we did this last meeting, and I apologize, guys. We took money that we didn't spend on Yopon, and we moved it over, I believe, to Capital Reserve, is that correct?
That's correct.
How much was that?
195.
195, so
Yeah.
round numbers, 200,000. So we're 300 short, and that's 200,000 in itself.
That's correct.
And that's now in the capital reserve.
That's correct.
It wasn't there as of last month.
That's right.
And that's included in that 361,815 on the memo sheet, the very front.
Okay, yep.
That's the balance.
That's the balance, that's not the total balance, the total balance is 420 something, but that's inclusive of the money that's put aside for the canals. But 361,815 is undesignated, you know, it's not designated to be spent on anything specific.
Yeah, that's the usable balance.
That's in there.
Yes, sir.
Because there's some we just can't touch.
The canal money is designated, so that can only be used for
this is only-
canals.
But of that, the 200,000
195 is in that 360.
is in the 360.
Yes, sir.
Okay, and I had a question too, there was been other revenues line, the last revenue line, there's a big difference between 533 and 173, could you help?
Most of that is the 500,000 from the Narren County beach nourishment for this year.
Okay.
500,000,
So that's
that's
the
where
difference.
most of that is, yes, sir.
Okay, any other questions? Not any other questions, I'll go on to the individuals. We start with the administration department, and I'd like to remind the council, we just went over the memo, and all salaries and employee benefits that are cited here include the items that I just went over with, the individual
Peter?
items I went over with you.
Before you go there, go back and, okay, we did 749 last year for the fire contract, and this year it's projected at 813. What's that difference?
As you'll see when we get to the fire department lines, the fire department has made a request, as the chief did in 2 of your meetings, that he will include in the budget a request for $60,000 for a deputy chief. So that's included in there. And then also, as I reported to you at several meetings, we also project, anticipating council approval, if council approves participation with the building in the fall when bids come in, there is debt service and closing cost projected in there as well,
Where does
in the
that-
exact same amount.
Does that show up in the fire lines?
Yes,
Okay.
and we'll get to those
Sorry.
in a minute. Oh, excuse me. Okay, we're on page 3. I mean, excuse me, 2 still. Page 2.
What page are we on?
Page 2 of the budget at the bottom, and we're doing line item revenues now. Starting out with ad valorem taxes, I'll just go down these because you can see the amounts yourself, but there are property taxes for the current year, property taxes for prior years that are unpaid, vehicle taxes for prior years, vehicle taxes as they come in from the state for the current year, penalties and interest, and then the total ad valorem taxes to the town of $3,013,549. And that is the largest revenue contributor for the town's budget. The next are the occupancy, sales, and land transfer taxes. Those are tourism taxes. Occupancy, you can see, local option sales tax, and then the land transfer tax, making up $2,129,539. Again, a significant part of the town's budget. The unrestricted intergovernmental revenues, these are revenues that are received by state action. Utilities franchise tax, video programming tax, the telecommunications tax, the PEG channel revenue, and then the ABC sales revenues, our portion, beer and wine tax, our portion, solid waste disposal tax, our portion, 426,622. Next comes the restricted intergovernmental revenues, of course, meaning they have to be spent for what they're designated for. Power bill, based on our road mileage, public street mileage of $119,000. The next two are the two of the state grants, projected $15,000 and $37,264 for the police department. Matching, these are matching grants, and you'll see the expense, projected expenses in those. The next is the Government Access Channel Grant, $10,000, and then the Shoreline Stabilization Grant, which comes from occupancy tax funds of $24,000. So the total restricted intergovernmental revenues there is $205,264. Next page of page 3, continuing with revenues, projected revenues, permits and fees, the building permits, plan review fees, Coastal Area Management Act fees, planning board fees, court costs and fees, and parking fines, $124,000. The other revenues are listed there: interest income, rental income, miscellaneous, body armor grant, and the Outer Banks Community Foundation. That is a grant to the town each year from the Fletcher Trust. Also, the Dare County Tourism Bureau grant of $119,000, and just so you can flag that one, that is the grant, the partial match grant that the Tourism Bureau granted for the East Dogwood Trail project that we just went over, that's proposed in your budget. Total other revenues there of $173,600, and to a total of $3,059,025. Those are the projected revenues. No questions on the revenues? If there are none, we'll go to page 4 for the admin department of your town. And again, as I said previously, any salaries and benefits include the items that we went over in the beginning on the memo. The individual items are inclusive. First line is salaries, and you can see the amounts: FICA, retirement, group health insurance, council compensation, council travel and training, the legal services, audit services, payroll services, computer services, insurance and bonds, advertising, travel. There is an increase in that due to some of the personnel changes that the council has directed and that they were included in the budget, and we'll go through those in a second. Telephone, utilities, dues and subscriptions, training. There is an increase in that line as well due to some personnel changes. Supplies, the same. Postage, equipment lease and maintenance. No municipal elections this upcoming year. The Dare County tax collection amount based on our agreement with the county for collections. Government access channel, government access channel membership, the MuniCode publishing of the town code each year, vehicle operations, employee recognition and appreciation line, and the wellness initiative, and those two lines are what the town has traditionally included in its budget for employees townwide. Contracted services, a miscellaneous line, the technology update for the Pitt Center, we put in there the same amount each year. Whether or not that amount gets spent or not depends on the amount of the grant and whatever kind of project we can come up with for the Pitt Center. Recording of meetings has decreased, was projected to decrease. The cleaning services for the town buildings. So that makes an admin department proposed expenses of $1,007,058. We can go to planning and code enforcement on page 5. The salaries is the first line, and that includes the cost of increases directed by council to create a new employee title classification for deputy town manager / planner, and to also increase, per the council discussion, a proposed increase in salary for the permits officer. FICA line, group health insurance, employee retirement, contracted services, printing, advertising, travel. The travel line will increase for training for the new position. Training as well, dues and subscriptions, training as well will increase for the new position. Supplies, vehicle maintenance, and capital outlay. This it proposes a new vehicle for this department with the retirement of an existing vehicle. Vehicle operations, homeowners recovery fee, flood zone map, miscellaneous, historic landmark designation. This was a decrease based on the assessments that we had projected originally and the assessment write-ups basically for each property. We've gone through now a year of experience on that, and we don't think it's going to take that kind of expense. So we've been doing a lot of them individually and in-house, or the property owners have been doing them in compliance with the state directives. The next one is a time code update, and recall at your last regular meeting, I updated you on the fact that this would not be, what's left in the original contract will revert to unassigned fund balance on June 30, and there'll have to be a budget amendment to pull that back in July. So it's not projected at this point for this budget. So it's in the amount of approximately $16,000 that's left in that contract. And that'll be projected to be spent next year, but it'll have to be via a budget amendment per auditing standards. Board of Adjustment transcription is $1,500 is what we project for next year, bringing the total code enforcement budget $300,409. Page 6 is police department proposed expenses. Again, maintaining the same level of services. You'll see the salary line, holiday pay, overtime pay, FICA, and excuse me, line 2 means holiday working. Group health insurance, employee retirement, career development, computer services, printing. Yes.
May I make a request? Can we go over the items that have changed dramatically?
Yes, okay.
Instead of, I mean, I appreciate.
That's
the
fine.
thoroughness.
Okay, I was going down and I'll try to flag
No, I
those.
know you were, no, but if there's a change, positive or negative, maybe let's highlight those
Sure.
first.
Okay. You can see, if you, to follow with that, as y'all know, there are justification sheets attached to each one, and they will reflect the actual wording of each one. But if Chief would like to come over and sit with me, and I'll call on each department head, and that way they can comment as need be on any changes.
Thank you. Mayor, members of council, thanks for the skinny chair, too.
Oh, sorry about that. So you got a reduction in,
Yeah, we have a decrease in career development, $1,500.
We did a transfer chief since then.
Yes.
It's showing 7 on the actual budget.
Okay.
Transferred some money from there for your computer work or something.
Right.
so we have a slight decrease in computer services. I don't know, that's just a contract negotiation, or contractor negotiations at that point on certain cost. Everything else stays the same. We've made we go down to uniforms. Increase from $14,000 to $20,000, Chief.
Yes.
You got, what's some of the justification for the uniforms? I think that's what they're asking for. It just a cost adjustment.
It was a cost adjustment. We, I believe, there was a line item that we moved some of that out of uniform. Because I don't have that noted here.
Okay, just go through that. You can see on the justification sheet for the $20,000.
Can I say something? You're right.
We
moved
took-
6,000, so there's 14,000 in
Right.
the uniform for this year. So there have been some budget amendments that have been done since the justification sheets were turned in. So what is in the uniform line now is $14,000 currently. And it was 20, but he moved the money around.
Oh, that's right.
I was going to say, I know I didn't.
Okay, so the old, one, yeah.
Yeah, it was 20 before, so.
So we're going back to 20, stayed the same. Okay,
So it's good. Uniforms is going to be the same as it was last year.
okay. The reason there's a $14,000 showing under that column is because we had internally, administratively removed some line, changed the line on that, moved that to another line, $6,000.
Explain that, please.
Contracted services.
It was moved to contracted services.
Right.
Call for what reason he wants to know.
Yeah, we had to, I believe part of that was the camera system that we have on the outside of the police department. Socians gracefully tried to assist us with it, but it was beyond their scope, so we actually had to have the gentleman that did all this come in, and I hadn't had the money budgeted specifically for that. So looked at the uniform line item and figured that we can go without a few things, and requested a budget amendment to pay for that.
So the uniform line item 1819 says $20,000. Should that say 14,000?
It should not for this year. You can see on the justification sheet, he's proposing expenses of
I understand.
$20,000.
I read that. So last year it was 14,000 and this year it's 20.
It was 20 last year, but we took money out of the uniform
Yeah.
and put it into the
Well, it was 14
contract.
on 16, 17.
On these, I'm gonna send you, see right here, the uniform, where's uniform? See, original budget, 20. And it was 14 because 6,000 was moved up here to the contracted service line. See, it went from 16.5 to 22.5.
So you had to spend more on the cameras, and you took it from the uniform.
It's the
That's
same amount
correct.
of money, it was just,
So it looks like an increase, but the same amount was
Yeah.
budgeted last year.
And it's confusing the way the auditor makes you do this, because
Okay.
the money is all in the same budget, it's just being moved around to different areas, so it is confusing. So I understand what Gary's saying, because I had to look at it twice when I was compiling this too.
The next significant increase would be the $73,000 equipment purchases. And on the justification sheets, they're on there. Chief, you ain't highlight them?
Did we go over the contracted services?
If you'd like to do that,
Yeah,
contracted
the
service, go back.
contracted services, you'll see an increase. And that increase is for,
Hold on, wait a minute. Same thing, hold on.
Okay, contracted service originally adopted was 16.5. The revised budget is 22.5, because of the, transfer from the uniform money. So that's, where are you?
Contracted services, $19,000.
there again, it's confusing because it looks like it's actually a decrease when
When
in
it
reality
increased.
it's not. It's an increase.
So what was it originally in 17, 18?
16.5, or, yes, 16.5.
Correct.
That was the budgeted amount.
Mhm.
This is the
And then we-
actual amount that was spent.
We moved money
Just
across the
moved
line.
Uniform into there.
Right.
So to let you know that the increase is $2,500, and that's for additional LPRs that'll lock down our town on South Dogwood, which are license plate readers and traffic counters. So that's the reason for that increase.
What line are you on?
That was contracted
Contract
services.
Okay,
service.
got it.
Now we're on equipment purchase.
Yes. And you can see the increase there, and from $63,006 to $73,000, that's an increase of $9,400. We had one of the major cost issues. 5 years ago, we were fortunate enough to get a grant for a interview room camera recording system, which is mandated by the state of North Carolina for any kind of major felonies, murders, those types of things, that you have to record any kind of interviews. That was, I think, 8 years ago, and that system is no longer functioning. So this increase is to replace that interview room equipment. That includes the hardware and software and installation.
And we also increased the miscellaneous line, and that was based on the chief's and my discussion, that would be a contingency for the department for items that pop up during the year like they did this year.
Peter, can you use the technology update money to replace that camera system?
I can't, unfortunately. That technology money is only to be used for the Pitt Center audiovisual. We've tried every angle in the book to use it for something outside this period. Excuse me?
You're talking about the 10,000?
Yes.
for the current TV?
Yes, sir.
That is correct. That's all it can be used for.
Fred, you need to get them to loosen up those directives over there.
Can't you interview in here?
They're not going to do it.
It could come up missing some midnight, though.
No, that's a technology update.
Yeah, no, it's a good question.
That's
Kind of crazy.
So the next, there are no other significant increases. The lines do show the required separation allowance transferred to the pension fund for law enforcement, leaving the total expenditure for the police department $1,691,853. Any questions the chief or Bonnie and I can answer on the projections?
Thank you.
Yeah, go ahead, Chris.
Bonnie, maybe this is a Bonnie question, but what was the fiscal year 17-18 budget amount, total budget amount?
The total budget amount original
Yes.
was $1,654,546, and the amended is $1,662,310. And
So so that the amended amount is essentially equal to what you requested within a few dollars, literally.
correct.
And then the new fiscal year 18-19 is within less than $40 of what you requested last year.
Yes. Thank you.
All right, I'll ask Mr. Bradley to come over if he, for his departments.
Morning, David.
Okay, we'll start at page 7. And you'll see the format, there are a lot of blank lines, and recall that this is the auditor's basically directives to us to maintain the budgeted lines for the history. So some of the blank ones, obviously, they're not budgeted lines for this year. So basically, he's got his street sign maintenance, his engineering and arborist services, street maintenance, brush trimming, bridge maintenance is a slight increase in that particular line. David, have you got a bridge maintenance item?
It was just based off previous years of which bridges were being inspected on which years.
I believe this coming year, we've got, right, that's right, it's either 3 or 2, I can't remember, it alternates.
This year would be 3.
Yes, it's 2 one year, then 3 the next. So the next item is a increase, and I will speak for this beach profile study. This is the council-directed expense in this department. This is the $60,000 for a vulnerability study, and also a survey update of $34,000. And just to be particular on that, we did interview the engineer several times after he came and made a presentation to you that evening. The $60,000 vulnerability assessment is highly recommended by the coastal engineer to be conducted during this fiscal year. It's for the purpose of keeping us in the, on the radar with future beach nourishment projects, as well as the maintenance of the current nourished area of the town. The $34,000 is a survey update, and the engineer says that can wait and does not absolutely have to be done or need to be done, in this particular upcoming fiscal year. But as directed, there's $94,000 in that line.
Do you want to address that any further right now, or wait till we get to the end and go back?
If you don't mind, we can wait till we get to the end if you don't, I can,
I
because
have
there's some
concerns
others in
about
here.
that for a couple of reasons.
Dropping all the way down to the East Dogwood Bike Path, you'll see that that's the $250,000 from the town engineer's projected expense that this morning, and which is also included in your packet, for the concrete version of a 5-foot walking path from the intersection of East, North, and South Dogwood Trail to NC 12. Yes, sir.
So, yeah, and looking at concrete path option 1, he had like 254, and he had said that the new one would be about 250, so that's right on. And then I saw in the earlier line item was, I believe, the 144, which was the matching, that's shown in the revenue section.
119.
Shown in the revenue.
That's correct.
And then, but when you look at his number, there's another roughly 50,000 of contingency, which is smart to have a contingency fund in his number,
I said,
Yeah.
in addition to the 250.
Yeah.
But that's not the end of the world, because we're getting one,
yeah,
we're getting some of that money, so I just bring that up.
That's it.
that's not budgeted, is what you're saying.
Well, we've got the money for it, it's just what the delta is between the 113 and the 50,
Right.
Yeah.
I understand what you're saying.
the 65. It's essentially,
119. 250.
The email I've got from from the engineer was $250,000 for the project as a cost. And that's what we're projecting.
I don't think it's the end of the world, I'm just mentioning it only because what's good about this is that we're essentially budgeting the whole amount, and then we're gonna get some
Correct.
money back.
Yes, sir.
But we're just not gonna get quite as much back as we thought, just to hold that contingency, which we may not use, but if we
Well-
do use it.
And what Chris is saying, I think, $250,000 is what Joe said, but a 20% contingency is 305, which is about $50,000 more, and that's not budgeted. And he said, for whatever comes up, or...
But it
You'll
is,
have to show me that.
And it will be, actually,
Where's the email?
if he pulls out all those crosswalks and
yeah,
excess, it should decrease.
exactly, and he said that. But it is kind of budgeted in that he's got the money for, the 119, I believe you said it was. The 120 is
Okay.
included as revenue, so we can offset it a little bit.
I'd like to clarify that. I'm not sure if Mr. Anloff understood what you were saying on that. We're basing on $250,000 estimate that he sent us, the town.
The email
There's no mention of contingency on the 250.
Well, on his,
It is on the old sheets, I understand that,
on the
but
sheets,
not,
he's
not the
got-
250.
And he talked about that when he was in here.
He said that, and I would have to clarify that with him, because 250, we have interviewed him twice since we came up with the 250, and I'm not sure he understood exactly where the conversation was on the contingency.
Okay, if you could.
We can clarify that. 250, I'm certainly not going under budget on something like that, but we did, if we have, we'll certainly go back to him.
Well, and I do believe you have accounted for it in the revenue from the Tourist Bureau. We've got the money to cover that 50 without a problem.
Right, but the way that this works is you pay the full amount, you have to budget the full
Right,
expense.
right.
So we've already offset the revenue part of it, is already in the 119, so we would need clarification from him, like he said, if this needs to be increased by 50,000, we would have to cover the total cost and the expense line.
I heard what he said too, but I know you were pulling that off of the old sheets,
Okay, okay.
and the 250
Well, and-
figure is what he gave me.
It is the old sheets, and he's pulled out stuff, which should decrease it.
I would concur with that if he had sent me backup sheets with the $250,000 email, and he did not mention that to me in our interview or anything, so I just have to clarify that with
So
him.
next round, we'll look at it.
The next item, $654,870, is the amount of the 5-penny street infrastructure improvement amount. That is the increase directed by this council. The increase is in the amount of $138,870 over what the previous practice was, or previous policy was for the town. So the increase there, again, is $138,870. The next item.
Just a question.
Yes, sir.
You got everybody else, I mean, on all the other line items, you've got the previous years, and on that one, we don't.
Because we don't, as 18, 19, we wouldn't have spent anything in years before in the 18, 19 infrastructure. So they're an individual, like you see the 17, 18 up ahead.
Are you asking why they?
By projects. They're in there.
I got you.
They're just spent in different ways.
Yes, okay.
But you could total that and put it in parentheses or something, say, combine the total.
Well, I think that's the difference. It's the.
I know, but
yeah.
I'm saying you could total that and put it
Yeah.
in that line so you could compare
Before
from
you get
past.
those, and I'm sorry, I apologize to the chief, I should have said something before he got to these on these. So we have done some changes on the, some budget amendments within the budget. So when this, for the storm debris cleanup, the 16,778 looks like an increase, but the original amount that we budgeted last year was actually 22.5, but we switched some money from that line to another one. So the original amount was 22.5. This year, the amount is 20. So, and then on the bulkhead maintenance, the 85,000 is what was budgeted. But remember, we took some of that money and put that into the capital reserve fund. So that's why, so that's really not an increase per se, because we started out at 85. So, and that's what happened with the chief's budget too. I apologize, I should have caught that before we went through that, but basically.
Well, and actually, in the future, if we could have those either in red or some way to designate and show, and an explanation on the highlights, as well as, I'd like to have a column showing increase, decrease,
You mean in the
But-
current year or between this year?
between this year and last year,
Okay.
just to show, like, the 654, we know why that's increased. We increased the amount for streets and roads. The 250, you know, we didn't have anything to compare it to, so we don't have that, but that would be something that would be good information for us. Like that part on, with the chief, I mean, it looks like we went up $6,000 in uniforms, and he knows he wasn't trying to do that. And then the camera system jumped and then went back down. And so, I mean,
No, I understand. Like I said, that was my doings. That's not the chief's at all. That
I
was
understand, but
mine.
And it's a moving target too, so it's
Right.
hard, because we budget this money and then it gets spent in different ways and,
Correct.
you know, so, and,
Interdepartmentally, that can happen.
That's right.
I don't know whether it's, I think we can look at the comparisons of the two lines and figure it out.
Yeah, okay.
yeah, but you don't know what.
So she explained the storm debris cleanup. So this year, we're projecting $20,000 of storm debris cleanup. And again, that's non-declared natural disaster. And in addition to, this is what our Lemon Branch services call to attend to when we need him outside of the current normal routine of the contract. And again, the bulkhead maintenance repair has decreased from last year's adopted line, as Bonnie described, to $50,000. So that is the street, bridges, and canals budget of $1,157,597. Any questions on that?
What is the arborist services used for?
We seek the arborist advice. That was on the, by consensus of the council, that the staff seek to employ an arborist to look at any trees that are slated to come out for protection of the town's infrastructure, to get his opinion on whether they in fact should come out and, or could remain. And so we seek his advice on that.
I'm glad you asked that, Jim. I got a and just doesn't even pertain to budget. We've got crepe myrtles all over our town that the town planted years ago. Do they come under, do we maintain those? I mean, I see suckers growing out of them that need to be trimmed back and down by the school.
If you can point out those that are ours, we certainly, we
Well,
are charged with maintaining them.
The ones
yes.
down, well, I remember when, Paul was, they bought a truckload of them and planted them all over the town. I don't know where they all are. But there's one over by the parking, when you turn, going into Chickahawk, it's just a little scraggly crepe myrtle.
They are on a schedule. You'll see the ones on East Dogwood. They've done those recently, and they're like everything else in the town right away.
What about the
on
ones
schedule.
by the school right there?
We do maintain those. I know which one you're talking about. It's the only one out there that needs it. We just have
Well, there used
other
to be,
priorities right now.
there used to be right in there in Gravy Pond, like 2 or so. I just wondered. I know when they put them in.
Anybody else have any questions or comments on streets, bridges, and canals?
Let me ask you about engineering services. Are those the fees that we're paying Andy and Joe?
That are street specific, yes, sir. That are general in nature, say, if it's, if they have to come to a meeting, or it's like a CIP meeting or something like that, but like if it's a specific street, it goes with the total street cost.
Okay, so the design costs are based on individual projects.
Yes, sir. And these, one other item that's covered by this is if individual citizens are complaining about town street-generated stormwater flowing into their yard, and we have to seek a consult from the engineer, David and I, we will pay from that, out of that money as well.
Okay. The reason I asked, it looked a little low to me, but.
Yeah, that's for non-street specific, or like you said, projects.
Then we'll go to page 8, the actual Public Works Department. Commenting on the top line, the salary increase is due to the personnel change, the designation of or hiring of a director this year, as well as the fact that there is a Public Works supervisor position vacant in that department as well. Let's see. The other increases are associated, they are associated increases with that, with the personnel coming down. Slight increase in supplies. Got anything on the supplies? Just look just read that, and it's all, you got justification for that.
Yeah, it's just requested for small hand tools and for various parts and repairs for just different projects that we do around town. You know, that includes the nuts and bolts, nails, screws. We might have to go buy a $30 box of screws to repair the fence or put something back together. Then paper towels, toilet paper, water, Gatorade.
Showing a slight increase in equipment leasing and maintenance from $3,000 to $5,500.
Part of that includes the $1,500 for the new flail mower teeth. That includes having to replace the nuts and the bolts and the actual teeth. Quite a cost there. But the bolts do stretch out and the nuts do loosen up and can't keep them up there. But that was, I think, the big increase in that.
The next one is vehicle operations, going from 7 to 9. And that's basically fuel costs for the year.
That's fuel costs in the mowers and our other equipment. We need to keep that equipment in warranty. We have to run non-ethanol gas, which is something that was not being done in the past, but costs 20 cent, 30 cent more a gallon, depending on what we're doing, and also to cover gas for a new vehicle that we're requesting.
And that is the next line in the capital outlay for a new vehicle, replacement vehicle, $35,000. Equipment purchase goes down, reduced.
We're not buying, we bought a boat and a trailer, and a landscaping trailer in this budget. We just don't have any major equipment that we're purchasing this year.
Shoreline, down to shoreline stabilization. Each year is $24,000, and it was increased during the year this year by $6,000. We added, that's right, we switched over some money into that to complete, and then the shoreline stabilization is the annual $24,000 requested expenditure. And of course, that comes from the county occupancy tax money. The next item that's a change is the council-directed expense projection for the facilities assessment, $26,370. And I'll just call council's attention to our discussion on that. That was an item that did not have to be done this year. It was something we brought up, staff did. We projected, advised that, or recommended it be done in the next 3 years at least if council has the idea of upgrading its building system for the town. That is a quote from an architect who did the county's building assessment, $26,370, and the council voted to direct that as an expense. So that leaves that department's expenses projected at $546,339. Any questions?
I got one question on the whole budget in general. Either out of Public Works or the Police Department, where's the money coming from that would be associated with closing off NC-12 during the no left turn option?
Okay, the no left turn option, the initiative that the council has discussed for this year, recall that I have asked the mayor to place that on for your May 1 agenda in the form of an affirmation and for a budget amendment. That money would come out of this current year's budget to do a trial in June if the council approves that. There is nothing projected for next year's budget. So if the council all of a sudden decides it likes that idea, we'd have to come back and have a meeting and come up with that money. And that would be in 1819.
And that would be a budget amendment for the budget we're working under right now.
Yes, sir.
This.
No, excuse me, the May meeting would be a budget amendment for out of the budget we're working on right now.
Right.
If we came back, if you wanted to discuss this in July and August for the remaining part of this summer and for early next summer, then council would have to discuss a budget amendment for the budget that you adopt for 1819.
That makes sense.
Yes.
So do we need to go ahead and put it in, Jim?
Well, that's why I bring it up. I mean,
Good point. If we decide to continue it after July 1, it goes into this budget.
If I could follow up on that, it's going to be a council discussion that involves more than just dollars. After having meetings with the chief and looking at our manpower, if we were to do more than 2 weekends, you're going to have to take a look at actual needed manpower. As DOT said, they're not going to reconstruct the intersections. They're not going to change the lighting. So we're going to have law enforcement at those intersections, most likely including Juniper, each weekend if you do that. Currently, I'm informed by the chief, we do not have the manpower to do that. So it would entail bringing on some new officers to do that.
Can we see if it works first?
well, it seems like this may be a better subject for our next council meeting because, you know, if we just throw a number in there right now, I mean,
We have no idea
yeah, we don't know how we're going to do it yet, or,
whether we're going to do it past one weekend. We don't even know that yet. So-
yeah, it may just be a better, like Mr. Rasko's saying, talk about it at the May 1 meeting.
What the budget amendment I'll have prepared for you at the May meeting will be for one intersection, the cost of one intersection, South Dogwood only, not Juniper. And it will include rental for traffic devices and for the overtime for our law enforcement for 2 days. Any other questions?
Thank you, Peter.
Okay, we'll go to page 9. Sanitation Department. All of these are outsourced services that we maintain under contract. Residential collection, most of the increases that you see are due to contract adjustments, CPIs. Residential collection goes up slightly, as well as the commercial collection. Land tipping fee has remained basically the same. And of course, that's a cost that we pay to Arswell for them receiving the waste from Southern Shores. Recycling collection has increased slightly due to a contract now with Bay Services. Miscellaneous, we just put that in there at $500 for anything that might come up for as waste that has to be hauled. Large item pickup, there's an increase in that. Basically, we do it twice a year. We try to hold that to $3,500 a pickup. Some years we make it, some years we don't. It just depends on what comes out of the houses. Lemon branch removal, one of the more popular services in town, in addition to recycling. The contract, there was an increase in the contract this year, basically for consumer price index, and the fuel was I think the fuel surcharge was removed, and we still had an increase slightly in the contract. So the sanitation services, which include recycling and the large item pickup and the lemon branch removal, total $688,465. Any questions? If none, we'll go to page 10. Thank you, Dave.
Thank you, David.
Where is it? Have I skipped over that? Wes is here. If we go back to page 5 real quick, if council has any questions, I had not called Wes over, but if anybody has any questions of the planner under planning and code enforcement, he's here with me, and we can answer any question, or try to answer your questions. We went over that line by line, but if there are none, we'll go on to page 10, fire services. Contract fire protection. We're operating under the contract now that expires of July 2019, the current 10-year contract. So the increase that you see from 481,925 to 545,914 is a request for an adjustment by the fire department in the current contract formula in the amount of $60,000, approximately $60,000 to cover the cost of a deputy chief. And speaking on behalf of the fire chief, he came and did mention that to you on 2 occasions, that he was proposing that. He had to make that hire because of difficulties in finding someone to volunteer for that position. He was unable to do that. So that is the reason that it's projected as an expense for this year. The next line, if I could go to the 1718 line, is 267,700. And recall, that is for the actual architect to reimburse the fire department for architect services that the council directed. That was a budget amendment that, adopted that way last year, 267,700 to cover those architectural services, which will go through this fall. Recall at the last meeting, I reported to you that not all of that's going to be spent by June 30th. So what's not spent will come back to you in the form of a proposed budget amendment in July or August, but in one of those months right directly after the end of the fiscal year. So whatever's left on the 267,700 for this current year will come back to you in a budget amendment to finish paying out the town's commitment to the architect, and that will go through the bidding services. He's done when he brings you bids. Now going to the FY 18-19 column, I told you before in several meetings that I would project the exact same amount again, basically for a benchmark, and that amount would be used to cover if you approve a participation with the fire station, a new fire station in the fall when you get the bids. That's the projected amount for one payment, one semi-annual payment of debt service plus miscellaneous closing cost. And that's why we just kept it at 267,700. It may not come out to be that way, and the spending of that amount is be subject to your approval when you get the bids. So town manager or the budget officer can't go out and spend that. It is subject to your approval once you make the final decision in the fall as to whether to fund a fire station or not.
So that's really kind of, in case we do decide.
That's right.
It's a forced savings to say we're ready to do it.
Yes, that is correct.
And is that based on how many years and what type of interest and?
Yes, sir. The fire department has given us copies of their, and I've actually participated with them in discussions with lenders, and that will be put out for bid too. So anything that we discuss now is really not going to be ripe for discussion, for anticipating what the numbers actually come in the fall. But they actually based a scenario on a $5 million fire station with different terms. This amount is based on option 1, which were 30 semi-annual payments of $221,412.
That's 15 years.
Yes, that is 15 years at 2.88 interest rate,
And what was those semi-annual payments?
221, 412.
So if we did it, 267 wouldn't cover
It wouldn't cover a full year.
full year.
It's only going to cover one payment, which, recall, if you vote in the fall to do this, then when they do the closing, they're only going to be subject to one payment during this fiscal year. So two payments are not in there, just
So
one
that would be
payment.
$450,000 a year payment.
Essentially.
Then you've even got a little extra in there, plus or minus 40,000.
I do in this current
Just to
year.
match, just to
Yeah.
put a placeholder in there.
Chris can help me out in how to frame this question, but if the bids come in, they're accepted, the contract's awarded, isn't there some architectural construction observation or services that would need to be budgeted for?
Usually that's the case.
Excuse me?
Yes, that would usually be the case in a high-profile project like this. It could be more substantial, you've got a little wiggle room in there. You've got an extra 40,000 in there from the first payment.
Would that cover that?
Oh, in theory, it should. I mean, I don't, you've got the
Yeah,
quote.
and,
I don't have the quote in front of me.
The $5 million, I'm assuming he's put some in it, some of it, I don't know. I just don't know what he's got in $5
Yeah, it could be in
million.
that number. He's entirely
Okay.
right.
I mean, $40,000, it goes a long way toward covering it.
Yeah,
It
it sure
doesn't-
does.
Has he included staging for his station?
He,
I mean, that's going to cost to move his equipment somewhere else and lease space or whatever he has to do in order to continue to operate and provide service while the construction takes place, which could be a year to 18 months.
the chief informs me that he is absorbing that in his revenues, annual revenues he receives from his customers.
Okay.
We are the revenues, though.
Excuse me.
We are the revenues. I'm not trying
We
to.
all, we in
It's like,
Dare
okay,
County,
yes.
Dare County is a revenue source as well.
Okay, so I'm not trying to give you a hard time.
And, I can't speak for the chief, but he's working on it every day.
Well, maybe that's something we could, to Jim's point, maybe we can ask about the construction administration services and then get some clarification on the staging. If it's all in the 5 million, then we got,
I caution you on the 5 million, that is a big number.
I understand.
We're not going to know anything until we get the bids in.
Yeah, I have a strong feeling we're going to have some special meetings once bids come in anyway, so.
But I just want to make sure the council understood the process, that amount stays in there until you make a decision in the fall after bids come in. And the financing will also go out to bid by the fire department. We've had about 3 meetings on potential financing. The fire department will put it out for bid with us consulting and me sitting there with him and helping him draw the specs. But that'll go out as well.
We're not going to really know what the exact amount of budget until we get bids in and come up with a scenario for proceeding, if we do that.
We won't know exact, there's no way to know
Yeah.
exact, but it's going to be substantially more than the 813,614 that's on here.
We'll just have to get the bids and see where to go from
Yeah.
there.
At least we've got money in the.
Yes.
We've got enough to cover with our best guess of our first payment, maybe a little extra, and that's about all we can do right now.
Right.
Any other questions on fire department?
Can you,
Oh, lots of them, but we're going to have to wait too long.
Yeah.
can you break that out for us at maybe the next meeting and tell us what that increase would be as far as taxes and et cetera, if we had to raise taxes to do that per
I can
penny?
tell you, any increase would be divided by $129,000. I mean, excuse me, 135. 130, 130,974. Any increase is divided by 130,974, and that'll give you the pennies. If you want to, if we ended up the town raised it by a tax increase.
Right. But
Whatever it turns out to be, divided by 130, 974, so 131.
$131,000.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
And we'd be looking at about five, if, let's say, we don't know it, if it stayed consistent, we'd be looking at essentially 500,000 per year. Because two payments of 225.
If you're doing $500,000 a year and you feel like, in the way everybody's thinking, because we may all think different, especially as I do, as it comes to this point of year, if you keep everything the same like it is right now, and then you add the fire department as an extra, not considering what you're giving them this year, and then just take 500,000 and divide it by 131, which is 3.38 cents.
There's your answer.
Well, we're looking at increasing $336,000 over 16, 17. If you take out that 267,
It's only half that.
with the architect and yeah. So we're looking at $442,000 payments.
Yeah, right up to 5.
Next fiscal year, you'll have, if you approve this project in the fall, next fiscal year, you'll have a debt service amount there that could be that, yes. Any questions? If none, we'll go to page 11, Ocean Rescue. Ocean Rescue, because of the contract, there is a CPI increase. So he increases from 161,550 to 163,500. It's a contract generated. Any questions on Ocean Rescue? Just to clarify, we have 4 hard stands in the town, 2 rovers, 2 roving lifeguards, 2 captains, of course, and the director who attend to Southern Shores. The stands will go up in the middle of May. Hopefully, all the storms will be gone by then. If there's any questions on operations, I'll be glad to try to answer them, but Merrick is the director, and we can get any questions to him if you have any. If there are none, we'll go to page 12. What we've done so far now, it finishes the general fund. The cemetery fund is a separate fund by the town. And I do want to clarify that the town has 2 community foundation funds that are not reflected on this sheet, that were started by donors, private donors, that the town can draw upon, and it's reflected in your annual audit. Don't include those in the budget because they are in the audit as an asset of the town. But this is simply the operational cemetery fund. The actual fund balance is shown there, that's on deposit for this fund and as revenue, and then also the cemetery lots, we project sales of $640 this year. Is that right, Bonnie? Yeah.
And also the decrease is due to last year we had a seasonal employee that we paid from this who did the work down at the cemetery and that sort of thing. But if you recall, the council approved a year-round part-time position, so we no longer need that position, so that's why the decrease.
And that's under expenses, you'll see those lines blank, what she's referring to, salaries, so there is no salary there since we have a part-time public works. So a very simple budget.
How do you project sales of lots? I'm just going to ask.
Just trend it, we trend it. And also,
I'm sorry. Let's move on.
and as,
Conservative side.
We're seeing a big year.
Aging population.
okay, the other actual accounting fund for this local government is the Capital Reserve Fund on page 13. Separate fund. Under FY 18-19, you'll see the activity there. per the town practice over the last 4 years at least, we placed $20,000 into the fund, into a subline of the capital reserve fund for canal maintenance. That's to draw upon if the council ever authorizes any work to be done on the canals in capital in nature, redredging, polishing, et cetera, that money would be there. We could draw out on. At the bottom there shows you the activity. The balance as of March 31, 2018 is $225,607. Of that, in the canal subline, $58,792. And again, that's designated just for canals, and state fiscal law prevents that to be used for anything but for the canals. Then you had a transfer on April 3rd of this year, your last meeting, of $195,000. And Councilman Nason had mentioned that earlier. So the current balance for the capital reserve fund is $361,815. That's the capital reserve fund. Any questions?
That is less the money that we can't
That's
touch.
correct.
So there is actually more, but we just can't touch it.
420, whatever, yeah, the 58.9.
And the total balance is the canal subline plus that in red, 361.
420,607.
So the 361,815 is for general capital improvements.
I have a question for you, Peter. Have we been approached by the Civic Association for any help or assistance to them to replace the channel markers that have been lost in the last winter's ice event?
I have not.
Okay. There's at least 6 markers had to be replaced along with lights and signs, and I guess they may or may not be in touch with the town. I have no idea.
They haven't been in touch with me. I've not been
Just
contacted
curious.
by them.
Just curious. Thank you.
So that's the capital reserve fund. Those are the 3 audited funds of the town: general fund, cemetery fund, and capital reserve fund. And again, this is a forecast. These are revenues and expenses. And of course, by state fiscal law, in accordance with state fiscal law, I'll present a budget to you that's balanced in the first week of May. Contingent on anything that happens until then.
Question, Council, just for discussion at this point, but I just want to get your thoughts on it. We've got a couple items in this, under paragraph 2 on the first page. Town facilities assessment for $26,370, and a beach vulnerability study and survey. The survey has a breakout value of about $34,000. Do you think it makes sense to keep those in the budget, or go ahead and take them out now, $34,000 and the $26,000, unless for the facility assessment, those 2 items? In both cases, I feel like in the case of the survey update, the contractor himself has recommended we hold off on that for a year. And with good reason, because they're going to be doing our beachfront survey when they do the Kitty Hawk final survey. In other words, the Kitty Hawk taper includes all the nurturing we had done. Is there any reason to keep that $34,000 plus in the budget for this year if we're not going to spend it for that?
That's right here.
I don't see any reason to keep that in there, nor for the facilities assessment, since it's been stated that's not a critical item.
No, that
Excuse
was
me.
last year's. I'm sorry, we were looking at the 34,000 and we saw that it was in the unassigned fund balance, but I believe that was last year's. That's right here. I hear what you're saying is to take it out from this year because we don't need to, which,
I mean, but why budget for something we're not going to do until next year? And the other thing is just a subjective decision of whether we want to leave that 26,000 plus in there for the facility assessment if we're not going to do that. If we're not committed to do it. So you're looking at about $60,000 that we might be. I'm not making a motion as such right now. Just getting your thoughts on it. It's not a lot of money, but is there any reason to keep it in the budget if we're not going to spend it? Does that make sense?
but the 34,000 to me seems fairly easy. If we're not going to spend it this year, there's no reason to budget for it. We'll just make sure it's in next year. And then I guess the town facilities assessment, we could discuss whether there's a need.
But we'd still do the survey, right?
No, we did the beach vulnerability study. That's what he'll do for the $60,000.
The entire profile of the beach.
No, that's the vulnerability side. I'm not sure what that includes. It's what he suggested we do and be willing to pay for.
And then the survey would be, I mean, the thing you're talking about taking out 34 would do the profile of the beach,
Next year, after. we don't need to do
the
it,
entire beach.
As far as I know.
Yeah.
That's about matches what we paid this year in that 33, so it makes sense, and they did the whole beach too, so that.
And we'll get the south end of our beach included in the
That
kitty
part
hall.
out there.
No, the survey was the whole thing. The survey, he presented that to us, that was the whole.
That's right.
He did, and so that matches, and I think you're right, Tom, in that there's no reason to budget for it if we're clearly not going to use it.
So I'll make a motion at this point. Just, go ahead, you got a question, Jerry?
Well, you're talking two things. The other is the facilities assessment.
Right.
And we haven't done that in years, and staff brought it to us. I know. So we probably need to know what our needs are.
Yeah, not arguing that. It's just a question of whether we want to pursue it this year or not. And I would make a motion just to this point that we consider, that we remove the survey update from the beach vulnerability study line and pull $34,000 out of the budget right there.
So break them apart for now.
Break them apart for now. Do I have a second?
I'll second that.
Any further discussion about that one? If not, all in favor of removing the survey update from this year's budget, $34,000, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
You okay with that, Fred? Gary?
I'm okay.
All right. So
Can
we'll take
I
a
mention
minute.
something, Tom, too?
Yes, absolutely.
Would that be all right? So, we, just last month, we had approximately, it's a little bit less than 200,000, which we moved to capital reserve for Yopon.
Right.
I would like us to consider taking that 200,000 and putting it back in the budget for this year so we can do Yopon. Or for the capital reserves, but probably Yopon will be on the list too, because that's its schedule.
You don't have to put it back. It's in
I think-
capital,
I
so it
think-
can be used for
I think
that.
that's a management function.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's
I think-
fine. If you can do it, that's fine.
It's in capital it's in the capital fund, so you can use it for bulkheads, so he doesn't have to move it.
That's great. I'm
Is
good
that
with that.
okay?
That's fine. You'll probably see some projection along those lines, like I responded to Councilman Newberry about a while ago, anyway.
Because the way I'm seeing it is, to balance, we have round numbers, $300,000 we have to balance. 200 of that can potentially come from this one pot, which we just discussed, and Peter can do that from the capital reserve. We just pulled it out. 34 Tom's dealt with. So we're really only looking at a shortfall of about 66,000 to meet our budget.
I think, yeah, I agree with you. I understand what you're saying. I understand totally. But I think that's really Peter's function to bring that back to us and see he's recommending. He may
Yes,
decide
yes.
some other way.
Yeah, I'm okay with that. I'm just looking at the big picture.
I understand. So I'm gathering here is you want to leave the $26,000 in the budget for the feasibility study?
I'm fine with it. I think we,
Any other thoughts about that?
I'd leave it. I mean,
You talking about the assessment for town property?
Yes.
Oh, yeah, I'd leave it.
Okay. So we're going to leave the $26,370 in there as part of the budget and take out the survey update. Okay. That's all. Thank council. Thank you. Anything else, Peter? Let's look at our agenda.
do we need to, all this, we went through that totally, and we just did beach nourishment, and you started talking about the survey, taking that out. Do we need to add for, like, we got hot spots right now that are occurring? Do we need to budget something to address those ongoing? So, and if we don't use it, it rolls over into what project we may have to do in 5 years.
I would actually go a step beyond that, and we try and figure out how we address these hot spots on an ongoing basis. I'm not opposed to, by any means, being proactive on shoreline management, but before we budget amount, I think maybe we could, go ahead.
No, I don't mean to interrupt. I don't.
Oh.
I was thinking, though, that what you're both saying is going to tie right into that vulnerability study, where they're going to tell us where we're vulnerable, and I would hope, we can follow up with Ken, tell us, here are some mechanisms, sand fence, otherwise, that we can do to reduce our vulnerabilities. Does that?
I'm seeing a couple of troubling trends here in that people are automatically wanting to start beach bulldozing and also bringing sand in
There
from
you go.
off-site sources where it seems to be kind of counter to the whole design of the beach nourishment, so
They're doing that, by the way, right down in front of the hotel today.
Yeah.
doing what, the beach
They're
bulldozing?
Doing it,
They're
they're importing sand.
importing sand
Imported sand, okay.
and pushing it down in front of their dune.
And that's they can do that on their dune.
Right.
Yeah.
But I thought we were in sea turtle season.
Not on the dune, as I understand it. The vegetated dune is not part of that. That's what I'm being told. It's not part of the turtle conservation side area.
I'm not opposed at any means to allocating something for this year coming up, but what's the best thing to allocate for? I mean, I think we need as a town to
Well,
try
we-
and
my-
address the issue.
I'm just looking at what they told us as we went through that process. In 5 years, we're going to be looking at replacing or renourishing. And I understand what Chris said about the study, but we're not projecting for future needs on it, and we know it's going to occur. So I just, it's like the canals. We don't have to do anything in the canals this year, hopefully, major, but we're budgeting for those canals $20,000 a year for future needs. And
Well,
just thinking, if we're doing that for our canals, we just spent $1 million to nourish our beach, which was only a small portion. Why aren't we planning, and if we had, 5 years down the road, if we need $500,000 and we don't have to come up with it all at once, and if county has money to match, then we've got some of our source anyway.
well, and maybe there's an opportunity to do some of that. I'm hearing from both of you that it's a priority, and I would agree. Maybe we could look at,
Establish a capital reserve just for beach nourishment.
Just-
Beach nourishment or beach, call it what you will.
and maybe it's.
Call it what you will, Tom.
Maybe it's 20,000 to match the canals for now, it's just something,
Something to-
placeholder.
Yeah.
And maybe it's used, maybe you'd use it for sand fence one time, and you'd use it, it'd be for beach nourishment.
Well, we get the
We have the money.
$24,000 a year from the county that we
That's
can
correct.
use for planting and sand fence.
Planting, yes, sir. Planting and sand fencing.
fence?
It can be used for sand fencing.
Okay, so we get that, that's $24,000 a year.
Right.
I'm thinking for moving sand, because, we already have somebody, and you hit my point. We've already got somebody who wants to come back, drop sand and push it in front of Pelican Watch, and
Well,
we
there's
just
more than
nourished it.
one. Yeah, I know.
There's more down the beach, I
Yeah.
know.
The SSCA is starting to talk about that on some of their crossovers also.
You're getting into an area there where you get a little bit of a gray area. We're getting into dunes which don't belong to the town.
Right.
Yeah.
And we talked about the beach, which we are.
We are
have a
responsible.
responsibility for that. I just went to a meeting yesterday where I heard the cost of beach nourishment is now looking at about $10 million a mile. And when you're looking at $10 million a mile, how much do you want to put away annually? Realistically, how do we do that, team? We could put away some dollars, no question about that, for things like maybe cooperating with sand fencing, but when it comes down to the nourishment project itself, it's a big chunk of money.
Sure.
I'm not saying we shouldn't be planning for it, but if you want to start with $20,000 a year or $50,000 a year, it's probably worth doing that. How much difference is it going to make?
But maybe it covers some of them having to adjust budgets later, like we talked about.
I
just-
agree. I'm not.
If you're going to do that, you might as well leave it in capital reserve fund like we're doing now, is my advice, recommendation,
Well,
and not
and-
designate it.
And I like that, and maybe one way to look at it is, if we anticipate our first payment of the fire station would be like 225 or so. We've got 267 in there. We could potentially,
You could use, that could be, you could do a budget amendment in the year and establish it during the year once you see what's going on, if you wanted to do that. Yeah, same thing.
Can you go on, still talking about the beach nourishment?
Yes, because I think that's what Chris is talking, if I, Mr. Mayor, if I could
Switch monies all the time.
elaborate on,
we don't need, there's a little bit extra there. How do we get to it?
But how do you know that? The interest rates are increasing.
We don't know that. You're exactly right. It's a guess.
We have the Fed raising interest rates every month now.
following up on your comment, Mr. Mayor,
It's a total guess.
the same source of information on that, the county, of course, is saying that the fund, the current fund, probably won't be geared up for sufficient funding to do new projects north of Oregon Inlet until 2025. There is money, according to the county, for maintenance of existing projects, which our 2,500 feet would be part of the Kitty Hawk, is part of the Kitty Hawk project, but that's not for new projects.
Right.
So 2025 is what the county's saying we're realistically looking at if these bare beaches that have never been nourished, we pop up with a project by that time, then that would be the year, or somewhere around there, excuse me, approximately. So that just following up on if the idea is, I think there's two thoughts that I'm hearing. One is create a savings account, and the other is do something. On the do something part, I totally would rely on the coastal engineer, even with sand fencing for Southern Shores. And the reason being, every time we put sand fencing up in the last 10 years, we haven't put any up, the town has not put any up in 5 years, but prior to that, it's going to come down at some point if it's placed out there wrong or in the wrong section of beach, just like the plantings are. And so we'd have to defer to the engineer every single time. And that's what I would do this time as part of your vulnerability study. So 24,000 each year has been covering our plantings. We placed them in spots where we feel like they would survive a high tide and a northeaster. A lot of them have not. The first 2 years when we used it for sand fencing before we advertised for homeowners to do it themselves if they wanted it, was successful in some parts, and other parts it immediately got washed away, and we're stuck with the debris maintenance. So that's kind of following up what we've said in the past on the 24,000. I mean, if you put more money in it, we can certainly. I wouldn't do anything until I talk to the coastal engineer, because I'm just concerned that any money we put out there, if it's not put down right, the infrastructure is going to go away.
As long as you're talking about sand fencing and beach grass, we're okay. In other words, we can do those things. We talk about a beach nourishment project. We have a very small part of our beach that's covered now for this re-nourishment, possibly in case we do have in case it does have to be done. The thing we haven't got in place are the tools that we have to make it happen, which is probably municipal service districts and probably easements. Almost definitely easements, to be able to accomplish a comprehensive nourishment. So that's something else we have to be considering when we're talking about not just the cost, but also the legal hurdles we have to cross in order to get there. And that's something we can discuss at our May or June or July meeting. It's not something we have to make a decision about right now. We should be aware of those things. Mm-hmm. Anything else, Peter?
I have nothing else. I'll be glad to answer any questions.
Any questions for Peter? Any further questions? If not, anyone interested in speaking in general public comment? Thank you, Bonnie. Any further business, council? Having no further business, I'd ask for a motion to adjourn.
Also moved.
Second.
Thank you. A second. All in favor? Aye. Meeting is now adjourned. Thank you.